Hi, my name is Ari, and I'm so happy you have chosen to watch an episode of our podcast, the Growth, Grace, and Gratitude podcast. I was inspired to start podcasting as a kind of shift that I had from the dance world into journalism. I grew up dancing ballet, and I have performed with the New York City Ballet, Miami City Ballet, at Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, and in Madison Square Garden. So my overarching experience in dance has really inspired me to open up conversation that affects and influence our mental health. We have experts from every field to just talk about things and to find some level of growth, grace, and gratitude within each step of our evolution. I also want to mention that we have spiritual courses available for anybody that wants guidance on their spiritual journey. And if that includes coaching, we have a lot of guidebooks about inner child healing and mental health support and relationship guidance. And for students, we have great tutoring for writers who want to build on their journalistic skills or who want to publish their first novel, who want to work on their writing in general. We have courses in dance, ballet, yoga, and Pilates. So whether you are advanced or brand new, our classes are held on Zoom, and we have options for personal classes or group classes. And for writers, there's also an option of the typewriter. So if you have a typewriter that needs repair, we can repair that for you. And if you need a new typewriter, you can purchase a beautiful typewriter and start the writing process at your own pace. If you would like to have me on your podcast or would like to be a guest on my podcast, or if you want us to answer your questions in an upcoming episode, please send us an email at growthandgracemindset@gmail.com. If you like our shows and they resonate with you, please consider giving our show a rating of 5 stars. Give us a comment, follow, and just enjoy the episodes. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your journey with us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Gratitude podcast, where we talk about all things mental health, wellness, healing, spirituality, business tips, entrepreneurial tips, and so much more. And today we will talk a little bit about how to actively participate in the quest for self discovery to essentially find your own authenticity and transparency on their journey towards happiness with our special guest, Andre Schabelmen, a comedian, actor, writer, and travel host. And he was a successful tech entrepreneur, one of the first 30 Airbnb employees. He built a successful career helping expand businesses internationally, culminating with him being on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange as the VP of International Expansion at Fiverr when they were public in 2019. He has a master's degree in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School and a BA from Williams College. And now his current dream is showing the magic and power of human connection around the world through nomadic travel. So, what a beautiful bio and very interesting journey you have experienced. So, thank you for coming on and so excited to chat.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. And it's actually interesting that you mentioned that you were in the business world and that you felt that you were like lacking the human connection aspect of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting because I have a lot of spiritual clients and podcasts with spiritual guests who are now kind of trying to go into business, but once they went through their like spiritual awakening or spiritual journey, they feel more inclined to kind of like take the business side of things, but also incorporate their spiritual essence. So, is that what you experience, kind of like going to business without a spiritual mindset or a spiritual component?
I think that maybe it'd be different if if I had been in the business world for myself. I think what inherently happens is when you're part of an organization, the hierarchical nature of that organization often forces people to not share their opinions because those opinions are a threat to the hierarchy. And there's a whole like systematic way in which those organizations really seek to numb out people's feelings and emotions and to encourage people to just want to attain more and more and more without having a really deep connection with their purpose or their meaning. I think it's possible, more possible when you're building your own business, probably, but I still think that money is often an exchange for something. There is some sacrifice that comes with making money, which I don't have a problem at times making, but I think we need to be aware of it, probably.
Yeah, that's a really great point because the idea of money in business and having a purpose, if there is a sole purpose of greed, then of course there is no room for negotiation or collaboration or networking in a healthy, holistic way. And that's why so many people who are choosing to kind of, like you said, go into your own business or starting something from the ground up that has those intentional framework and mindset in mind. This is kind of also a new branding and a new direction that many business people and even just people who have never had a business but who are craving that sense of business, but also through a spiritual way as well.
Yeah. There is one caveat that I've seen in the business world, aside from people who are starting their own businesses, that has an aspect of actually caring about each other and ourselves a little bit more. And that's in the form of family businesses, which have their own set of problems, for sure. But um, what I find interesting about those models is that oftentimes people show up to the table with the assumption that they're going to figure out a way to come out the other side, even despite the differences of opinions. And I think that's like an interesting model too that could make organizational forms of business more successful in terms of their ability to play into the wholeness of our being as opposed to, what we were just talking about. Um, but I think like anytime, to go back to the sole business owner that I think a lot of folks in the spiritual world end up kind of going down and likely um, prioritizing as they want to put their work out into the world. I do think that if part of your job requires getting the attention of others in, like, say, an online social media capacity, there still is an awareness that you have to do certain things in order to get that attention. And it is a hard balance to both stay connected to your actual truth and your authenticity while simultaneously looking for the validation or the attention of others.
Exactly. It's like it's a dog world in a way, and that is totally the trick is to find that balance, which is so difficult because yeah, of course, everybody wants to follow the crowd and find their way and find their place in the world. And there's so many arguments, especially how you mentioned like family business. I feel like it can go two ways. It can go either where it's completely chaotic and there's no room for even communication because everybody has their own, egoic expectation or perception. Or
Mm-hmm.
it can go actually, it can become the most powerful thing ever when there is a deeper drive and force and purpose after the priority is making sure that everybody is heard and their point of view is honored. So I think it comes down to like, having that sense of awareness of what you're willing to offer to the world and how you're able to respect other people as well. Like those core elements
Totally.
of our human self.
One of the things you just said reminded me of, like, I don't even know how this conversation just so quickly became about this, but I think one thing that's really interesting about the sole proprietor kind of forms of business that are also um, complicated is that we often think that we're the only ones in the room when we're building our own businesses. And in reality, there's like multiple people that are in a boardroom within ourselves. Like, I personally have a dictator. I also have a skeptic. I also have the person who's afraid. I have the person who wants to go slow because he's feeling ambivalent or ambiguous. And oftentimes I can have the dictator come in and be like, this is what we're doing. And then the other parts of me are left kind of, being like, hey, I'm still here. Why, like, you're not listening to me. And like, they'll run their own subversive little program to sink the ship. Um, so it reminds me that actually, even when we're building our own businesses, we still have multiple people at the board in the boardroom.
That is fantastic. I love that you mentioned that because I feel like even having that awareness of myself, I feel like oftentimes I'm more of the dictator kind of vibe.
Uh-huh.
And I have some friends who are, some are actually a little more like quiet and shy. And I have to, in a way, become aware of my own limitations in a way and to offer my hand to be like, what are your thoughts? Like, what are your thoughts? Even if
Yeah.
they're a little bit shy, because that's when we're able to kind of dig deep to find value. And that's what we're after, right? We want to find value in the business. We want to help people discover their value. And to also, like you mentioned, to figure out like what is your strengths, what is your weakness. And I feel like it's such a gift when as humans we're able to figure out our strengths and also figure out our weaknesses so we can see other people and we can also bring them aboard based on their strengths as well, because we can't just think we're the best and everybody else is not, because that's, that's not practical, it's not realistic, it's not something that can be fruitful. And teamwork is so important, especially when it comes to business. I don't know if you have experience like teamwork and how efficiency is so important, but I feel like especially if people who are empaths or they're wanting to become in the business world more, to be more like accessible, that idea of teamwork is huge.
Yeah, I agree. Um, w- yeah, like, without collaboration and bringing all the different, spaces of experience and air lanes of genius together, you're only going to get one very limited expression, whatever product you're creating. And I think that, um, yeah, I mean, I think collaboration is necessary, and honoring, like, it's often, I would say, I would say 100% of the time, the people that you're in teamwork with or in collaboration with, they always represent some part of you. And
Yes.
like, if you can think of yourself as like one organism rather than these separate pieces that are kind of vying for power or control or say, which often happens because they're not feeling honored own in their own space. But if everyone can be honored because we see everyone in the room as part of or an extension of ourselves, then I think like we do end up with outcomes that are more comprehensive, they're more full, they're definitely more authentic. They incorporate parts of our humanity that aren't just expressions of what we want to see in the world, like from an idealistic perspective, but from a reality and a truth perspective. Like, and so often, I think part of the problems that we see in the world are entirely because we've disconnected from parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at, or parts of the world that we don't want to look at or honor, because it's not pretty or because it's ugly or because it makes us look bad. But if we move forward in the fullness of it, there's something that is so beautiful and powerful about that product that we put out in the world, even if it doesn't like glimmer or have the veneer of gold on the outside. It tends to, I think, have more resonance.
Yes, 100%. That's so true. And it's actually a great way to talk about your book. And I think it came out, is that today or yesterday? It recently just came
Yesterday
out.
was pub date.
Wow. Congrats, that's
I don't.
amazing. And I was just going
Thanks.
through
Yeah, I don't
your
know how to think about it.
yeah, I was just going through the chapters and I made a note about chapter 4, brain versus heart leadership, and I thought this is a really great kind of idea. Like I remember learning about the chakras and spirituality and how and also like the gut brain connection and all these different kind of like
Mm,
communication pathways and how like the brain versus the heart. So normally we are taught like listen to your brain, what is it saying? But then as more people began awakening and began tuning into their empath sensitive nature, it felt like there was a shift and more people were like tune into the heart and tune into what you're feeling. But that also in a way has faults and limitations because when you're just going into the emotional feeling aspect, you're forgetting the brain, which is a huge component of, leadership and intelligence. And I think there's something with the higher heart intelligence that's also connecting the heart to the mind. So what is your perspective about this? And you can talk a little bit about your book as well, because it's also very interesting.
yeah. Well, I guess like I can't. I'll talk about my book, but I have to talk about my life, which is that I grew up in an immigrant um, Jewish household. My parents are from Argentina. They were my great grandparents were forced to leave the area that is now Ukraine, and just like a lot of history of I think oppression and trauma, and that got carried on to me in the form of a lot of pressure to succeed and sort of like check off a lot of externally validating security based pursuits, mostly around money and education. Um, and I think in that process, I became successful in terms of that value system. But it was very much like informed by fear and the way in which fear basically, I think, usurped um, a lot of the emotional expression. I think in many ways, um, love growing up was connected to success and achievement.
Oh,
And so in many ways that I feel like the brain and the sort of like the fear action machine of mine was kind of like it overcame and took over the heart in a way where the heart kind of was there, and it had little murmurings of desire, but that desire was a threat to the system that was supposed to secure and ensure my basically survival. But I achieved all those things, and it came pretty clear in various different moments that I was abandoning a big part of myself, my fulfillment, my desire, my purpose, my meaning, my a lot of things that I wasn't even making contact with because those fears and those survival mode instincts and teachings really um, encouraged me to not feel and not feel from my heart. So naturally, the next step, if I'm looking towards fulfillment, joy, happiness, growth, all those things, it was to really become in contact with what my heart was trying to say the whole time. Um, which sometimes it was like, yeah, I am afraid, and sometimes I want to. Sometimes I'm actually overwhelmed, and I think a lot of times making contact with what my feelings were often in the form of negative feelings that I had, or whatever. I don't know if I want to put value judgments on them, but negative feelings that I hadn't been able to make contact with. And then as I made contact with those, I was like, oh, whoa, there's another set of emotions too that are like joy and um, aliveness and excitement and things that in the past I kind of there were mirages of those feelings, but I really didn't kind of listen to them. And so I started to cultivate a an awareness practice around what I was actually feeling. Like being even able to name feelings was like something new to me. And then from there, I could have a conversation between these different parts of me. The part that was afraid, the part that really still was holding on to survival mode stuff from my ancestors potentially, and the parts of me that wanted something different, that felt like there was a something else yearning to surface. And then I can have that conversation and then start making decisions from a different place. And that whole battle, this heart versus brain, is like a way of kind of like summarizing what that experience was of stepping into my what eventually is like, you know, acting as much as possible from my heart.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's very, and it's interesting because today's actually the full moon in Leo, and that's like the 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 masculine aspect of us all. So it's like that energy of rising above. Like you mentioned a lot about like ancestral trauma that so many of us do have to like process and go through, which is difficult, especially when we had to like numb ourselves for different reasons, and now we have to kind of go into those areas. That's like our deepest shadow self. It's awkward. It's super uncomfortable. And how you mentioned to just to even to name the feelings and the emotions. Yes, that's like once you're able to name them, it transforms so much energy into like focus. And instead of like unraveling, kind of like it brings you into that awareness. It's like, okay, this is like the name of the feeling. It's like I can actually make a little more sense of it. So it's really interesting how you talk about all this stuff in this journey, and how the Leo energy in astrology is all about standing up for your heart's desire and knowing what that is and going towards it without fear. Because Leo is that fire energy that's all about loving to be the center of attention for all the right reasons, to shine through the truth, to embody that grace and elegance of authenticity. And I think that's like a beautiful alignment.
Yeah, it reminds me actually of a really important part of my own journey to step into this sort of like way of honoring those those hues of emotions was actually when I started an acting career, which talk about stepping into the, you know, being seen in a very Leo
Yes,
kind of way.
totally. Yes.
Well, but one of the things that I first learned, or at least the type of acting that really resonated with me, was this type of acting where, you know, I was encouraged to use what I was actually feeling as a person in the embodiment of this character, so that then I would see emotions come through me. So let's say I was nervous, and maybe my instinct historically would be to try to block that nervousness to then represent strength. And in this new form of being that I was learning in acting, I would notice the nervousness. I would see it. I wouldn't label it as bad or good. It was just, okay, I'm nervous. Let me use it. And in the using of it, it then was perceived by an audience as being more real, more authentic, more resonant. And so like actually acting was a really big part of my process of like stepping into that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. When I grew up dancing ballet, so acting on stage is kind of becomes like second nature to me, and I enjoy it so much. But I do see that like when we're acting, we have to kind of use what we're feeling and how our emotions are, and we can't hide them. Like when we're on stage, if we hide them, we're gonna like resist our natural flow. So I feel like whatever we feel, we kind of have to accept it in a way, and to make ourselves like stand out even more. And that's obviously in the beginning it's like very fearful and awkward because we think that people can like see right through us. But that's also kind of like learning about your personality and again your strengths and weaknesses, and
Totally.
not bullying or judging yourself for them, because it's natural. We're not perfect all the time. We have those ebbs and flows of emotional shifts.
I, you just reminded me of like, it's kind of I think it was a very kind of traumatic experience early on in my acting career. But I ended up getting a lead role in a film that's actually on Amazon
Wow.
Prime. But I hesitate to even promote it because it was such a awful experience, and I'll tell you why. Because I was actually called in to be the lead as like a replacement for a lead that I don't know if got sick or something happened. I had like 4 days to prepare for like an hour and a half film where I'm the lead and I'm relatively early in my career and I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself. But the type of acting that I have is about showing up in my authenticity and then feeling what my feelings are. But the director ends up being this Polish dude from Eastern Europe, like um, who's the character that I'm playing is a director on film. So and he wrote the script. So there's a part where he's wanting to see himself in me, and in one scene, which he like gets so angry at me for, he wanted me to show up with more masculinity, with more strength in my masculine, and he wanted me to stand a certain way to reflect that masculinity, almost like puffing out my chest in this like very like
Like
old school
aggressive,
masculine
yeah.
way, aggressive, and like that's not where I think derived my strength from, or at least in that moment didn't derive my strength from. And so we got into this battle because I was like, I want to do what you want me to do, but what you're asking me to do, which is to reflect strength, is not going to be reflected when I'm puffing out my chest. I'm going to have to move in the world in the way that I feel confident and strong in for that to play as strength on camera. But I felt the bully coming in and being like, no, the man must stand like this. And I'm like, oh, fine, I'll do it. And then when I look at it on screen, I'm like, man, I look awkward. I look weak because I'm pretending to be something that I'm not.
Right, and that was like a projection from his part of
Totally.
the old way of masculinity. Maybe he thought it was like more stoic, but there's also a way to be gentle and stoic as the like
Yeah.
new age masculine is rising.
Yeah, yeah, but it's interesting. I mentioned it also, like because there's pressures to conform to a certain style um of expression separate from what you're actually experiencing. They're constantly there in our society, and if we're people pleasers, if we're empaths, we can often give away a lot of our power to the way in which other people want us to show up in the world, and abandon like what's actually true for us from a place of strength, from a place of vulnerability, from the place of whatever it is. And that experience was like so both traumatizing but also illustrative.
Yeah, those are interesting experiences for sure. It is challenging to work with people who their mindset is a little antiquated and
Yeah.
to like an old version of humanity. Yeah, that's so challenging. But it's so beautiful when there are people who are able to like grow in the moment because sometimes people don't know there are different options of expression, and when new people come along who are in those roles like to act, and if the director is open to be like, oh, like this is kind of what we're shifting into, that's like a beautiful thing. That's where like a healthy collaboration
Yeah.
helps, so many things.
I didn't I didn't talk about my book when you asked me to talk about my book.
Oh.
I can do it now if you want.
Yeah, totally. Let's dive into your book. It's so interesting that it's called Captains Wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly the message of the Leo. It's like you're the captain of your ship. Like it's so aligned. I love it. Yes, let's dive into your book and tell the audience like what is one like crucial thing that they should know about it. If there was like one thing they had to take away that would help them in their spiritual path.
Hmm. Well, I'm gonna answer this in a very me way and honoring the purpose of this book, which is, well, the book was written in second person. It's meant to put it's meant to put the reader in the shoes of the main character so that they are the ones that are going on the path to discover their own captain inside. And so, as the author who wrote in second person with that goal in mind, I don't think I want to tell listeners what I think the most important thing to take away is from the book. I want to stay true to the intent behind the book, which is to say, you are the captain of your own ship. And I am an author, but I am not an author who is imposing my own journey of becoming or trying to become the captain of my own ship on you. I want you to experience it for yourself. And the book is a blueprint for that. Without really, as best as possible, while still writing a book, um, maintaining the ability to serve as that blueprint for yourself.
This is like a very fatherly answer. It's like, here's the blueprint, child. Now figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just find your own inner light. Figure it
Yeah.
out. Like, here's the blueprint. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's that tone that you just mentioned, but it's also meant to be like protective of the place where we often give away power in society to a lot of these like thought leaders and gurus, and often we let go of our essence and our core and our own strength and our own like possibility of feeling our own power because we sort of extrapolate or we project onto our gurus and our leaders and our teachers this idea that they're the ones that are telling us how to find the answers. And in reality, like, well, not in reality, but what I want to be a part of is a process where people no longer give away that power, but retain it for themselves to be able to come back to their own power. Because I think it's from there that we then want to connect more with others, that we want to take care of each other and the planet, as opposed to creating this separation where we're constantly in a place of lack relative to people who know more than us.
That's really true. And if people would actually, I feel like a lot of people are learning about this, but those gurus and mentors who seem, so higher than that, whatever, they actually are trying to instill a fear-based mentality in people. And if they're trying to weaken people and make them feel like a victim, then obviously they're not a good mentor or guide or spiritual mentor, whatever.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of being a spiritual guide and mentor is actually like your approach. It's like, I'm not going to tell you, that's your journey. And if I'm going to tell you what to do, it's like that is your soul journey and I have no right. So I appreciate that a lot because this is actually, yeah, like you mentioned, giving the power back to people. And that's how we should be more as spiritual guides. Like, we have our journey, we can share our journey, we can share our insights, and not be so like micromanaging other people's journeys.
I mean, sometimes I worry that my skepticism keeps me from having these incredible experiences with these gurus, for example. Like, I mean, I'm an advanced master student of Joe Dispenza, but I have a hard time fully surrendering my pineal gland and my third chakra to a man who's so like concerned about what his he scrubs so much of his online like dissent and controls his image so much. And I'm like sitting there in his workshops, letting him, like, with his guided meditations, um, while I'm in such an open and vulnerable state, like basically in a trance state where I'm accessing my subconscious. I'm letting someone else step into that space. And
Right.
I have a skeptic that steps in those moments and is like, "Hey, I like this because it's giving me some power to be able to shift my future in ways that are aligned with my own vision for myself." But there's also this part that I'm like kind of distrusting, which I'm like really opening myself up for a whole lot of power being given away to someone I don't really know.
Yeah. Like, I'm like a natural skeptic, so I'm skeptic of everything, and that's how I start. Like even like in
Yeah.
friendships, like that's just my natural state, and I feel like that's okay. I accepted that part of me because before people were judging me for that, but I don't care, you know. I will be a skeptic and prove me wrong. It's totally fine. Like I'm open in a way, but I think also like based on our experiences, we shift kind of like attachment styles, we shift belief systems, and sometimes people go through betrayal and so many timelines of destruction, and this is kind of like it's polarizing their views to help them protect themselves in a way. But as long as they are not hurting themselves and closing themselves too much from the potential of beauty
Yeah.
and you know whatever, it's it's interesting that the skeptic, because some people are also going in the other way, which they're so afraid to be skeptical because they think that they're going to be like a failure, and they don't even know how
Mm.
to dissect skepticism, so they'll just go along with somebody else's narrative that's also horrible, because then how are they going to find their authenticity? How are they going to be able to tune into their intuition and see if this is a line, this is not a line,
Yeah.
this is sketchy. I mean, I think it's
Totally.
fine to be skeptic sometimes.
Oh yeah, and I think like one of the main points of Captain's Wanted and just about everything that I do in my life is with the idea in mind that I want to encourage people to find their own discernment. Like ayahuasca and plant medicine is great, but like uh, I would be very selective on who I go into ceremony with. I wouldn't just like jump into ceremony with a self-proclaimed shaman like that I don't see the care and the intention that is behind their form of medicine. I would be skeptical and I would be discerning, re- discerning in order to serve my own growth and my own process, which only I am aware of.
If
Um,
even, because sometimes
if
when I
even, right,
and
if
yeah,
even,
like
but at least like people who I know are caring. Like if I'm putting myself in situations where I'm going to be vulnerable and susceptible to someone else's power, like I have to have a high threshold for who I'm allowing into those spaces in my life.
100%, and discernment is such a gift. Oftentimes, we might think that it rejects us from, you know, having new friends or going to new places, because if we use our discernment correctly, oftentimes we're not aligning ourselves with the highest potential or the highest timeline because we're going into it with a fear-based mentality. But once
Mm-hmm.
you take away that fear and you actually honestly discern and you're like, okay, I can sense that this is just not aligning to my morals or my values, or I can feel there's some kind of block in the heart chakra, you know, or something like that. This also gives us back our power and our authenticity to help us to move into a different direction that might be filled with greater things. But that's where discernment also kind of you have to deal with in a way your shadow self, because having discernment means you're going like like you mentioned in your book, you're going on your own path. And going on your own path takes courage, and it does take bravery to go into those uncharted territories.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I think I've had people mention how courageous it is that I take certain steps in my life, and I think now that I've become so aware of how much discomfort I'm actually tolerating when I'm um, living a life that is more cozy, comfortable, and not taking quote unquote risks, I actually become aware of, yeah, okay, it is courageous to take these steps, but it's also, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, there's a lot of energy that is expended on keeping myself down and not actually feeling the discomfort that I'm actually feeling in the moments where I think people are saying that the departure from that is courageous. So it's like, actually, I don't think it's that. It's not that it's not courageous. It's that the thing that I think is that comfortable isn't actually that comfortable.
Right. That's very interesting. Yeah, that's part of the journey. And when it comes to like finding happiness, has that changed a lot for you now, based on like before what you thought happiness was?
Yeah, I think happiness is confusing because um, would I necessarily like? I think there's an argument to be made that there's a form of happiness where, like that whole ignorance is bliss motto. I think there's a form of fake happiness, which is like this, that toxic
Oh yeah, for
positivity that
sure.
you can convince yourself that you're
Oh
really
yes,
happy,
yes.
and you can be living in the light all the time,
Totally
and
performative.
totally. And there is something that like feels a little bit filled with joy in that. Like there's an excitement to it, and like, but if I'm honest with myself, like truly honest with myself, it is performative. It isn't really connected to the reality of what's happening underneath the surface. And there are some people in the world that will live uh, a sufficiently joy filled life by ignoring those parts of themselves. I don't believe anymore that for me to be able to live a full life where I'm in touch with the depth of all the different kinds of emotions, can I live a life where I'm ignoring those more difficult emotions or more uncomfortable emotions? Because I will be selectively numbing, which we know isn't possible. Thank you. I think Brene Brown. Um, I think I will then also have a program that's running underneath the surface that like just mm, often rears its head back up in dark and uncontrollable ways, because like at the end of the day, like you can't push down the emotions forever. Um, so okay, to answer your question, like I think happiness now is more about fullness, and it's more about aliveness, and more about adding hues of emotions, and textures to my experience, and lenses on top of lenses through which to experience the world, so that everything becomes more full, and that feels like I'm more alive, and that to me is like happiness.
Great. That's a great spiritual answer. I love it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
awesome.
good.
And I feel like we're all learning how to be happy and how to find happiness, especially like when we're learning how to value all parts of ourselves and how to like not leave the shadow parts of ourselves out. And I think as we're learning more and more about ourselves and our purpose and our values, I feel like for me happiness is about getting clarity. So if I can have clarity,
Mm,
that's like happiness. And it's like it's kind of the opposite from performative, because performative it's kind of like putting on a mask, putting on a disguise, and pretending. And like that bothers me. Like I don't appreciate that. I mean, it's great to be performative if it's helping your mental health, because sometimes we have no option. We have to try to be performative, and sometimes that actually helps us
yeah.
shift into positivity. But I feel like clarity is the best gift. It also helps with discernment. It also helps with
Mm.
knowing how to make your next choice, knowing which direction to hopefully go towards if you want to, start a new business or make a new friend. It's that clarity should help inspire us, hopefully, to be that captain.
So how does one, from the place of being ambivalent or ambiguous, get to the place of clarity? Like, what are some ways to
um,
move there?
well, I feel like when it comes to ambivalence, you mean about just in general being and like
Yeah, I mean, like, or let's say, like, I think oftentimes when I'm like in the beginning stages of like a relationship,
yeah,
there's often that place where I'm like, oh man, like I see their really great qualities, but I also see and focus a lot on the negatives. And now I'm in this like place where I'm like kind of paralyzed and I don't know what to do. Like, are they the right person for me? Are they not the right person for me? Do I move forward? What do I do? How do you find clarity in those moments?
Come join my relationship coaching group. I literally have a group, but I can say that with relationships, I love this topic because I have a book coming out shortly about relationships and spirituality because I ask like all the questions that I know for myself I want clarity on. I ask them right away. And people, give me interesting responses. It's like if I want a long term or short term, like the basics, I have to know what I want and I'm gonna ask. So it's like, do I want long term or short term? Um, what do I like to do in my relaxing time? Do we like to do the same things when we're like recreational things? Do we like to go out to restaurants or have like picnics or eat at home? Like those. And how do we think politically, even though that's like, awkward topic, but I like to get into it. How do we think about kids? Um, how to raise kids if you want to have kids? How do you want to raise kids? There are so many. There's like the old masculine template. There's like a more newer masculine template.
Mm-hmm.
Like fatherhood, motherhood, expectations of like all those like deep kind of things that I like getting into right away. And some people will be like, let's just go out for a few times first. And like, no, like I would like to know now because like I don't like to lead people on, but also I don't want to lead myself on and get confused. So I think clarity begins there, if that makes any sense. I don't know how you kind of, figure out or if you ask any questions, but I started asking questions and I felt like it was a little bit awkward in the beginning, but I love it. Like I love it. And then I do get clarity very often, like very quickly actually. Because some people are actually also craving to want compatibility, and when they are
Mm.
craving to want compatibility, they'll be more open to sharing like who they actually are, or what they actually feel and think and what they value. And I think that might be a small step, but it's the first step to hopefully
Mm.
finding relationship clarity.
I like it. I like it. I think I would have a hard time answering all those questions though.
I mean that's fine. That's fair, But that's like a good place to start, even if you are not sure, which not many of us are sure right away. But I think that's the process of getting to know ourselves. Also,
Yeah.
it's a whole
Yeah,
process.
and I think there's something what you're saying there, which is like about honoring your not knowing.
True. That's also true. Exactly. It's like if you don't know everything yet, you can absolutely be like, I'm not sure yet. Would you be willing to learn together or be open to figuring it out together? So that there's also an
Mm-hmm,
option.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Yes. Wow, what a beautiful conversation. I love this topic of figuring out your path and not being pushed into it. It's such a beautiful, refreshing way to look at
Hmm.
spirituality and happiness. So thank you, Andre, so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your wisdom and your story and your book. Where can people get the book and also connect with you and to see your content?
Yeah, I mean, you can get the book any place online humanly possible. Obviously, you can go to that Bezos guy's website and order from there and leave a review. But you'll find other ones if you just Google Captain's Wanted and my name. And then I'm on right now. My profiles are all under Schabelmania, and I have a new podcast called Rebel, like RE-BELLE, kind of focusing on really beautiful humans who are also kind of thinking outside the box. And my third episode launches tomorrow, and I think Instagram's a good place to kind of follow along. And I'll link there to the podcast and to the book and my different expressions that I have.
Sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Andre.
Sweet. Thanks for having me.